Hello and welcome to another exciting episode of Season 2 of A Conversation with Carl. Remember to like, follow, and subscribe for the latest content. Today we have a real treat for you, a dog treat. We're so excited to welcome Shany Dror, who's currently conducting her postdoc research at the Veterinary School of the University of Vienna, concentrating on social learning in dogs. During Shany's doctoral studies, she examined language-related abilities in a group of exceptionally talented dogs. Shany produced the Genius Dog Challenge, a series of experiments broadcasted live over YouTube. The Genius Dog Challenge also was a scientific study and received massive media exposure around the world. Welcome, Shany Dror, to the conversation.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for being here. So tell me about the Genius Dog Challenge and how it was both a trend on social media and a scientific experiment.
So I'll take a few steps back to why we started this. When I started my PhD, my background is both in animal training, but also as a scientist. And I started my PhD and I got this job to train dogs to learn the names of toys, with the hope that I could later then test these dogs in different experiments during my PhD. And the first 2 years I was training and nothing was working. And we had dogs coming into the lab and we really did everything we could to train them to learn the names of the toys, but they kept failing. So in the same time, we found about 6 dogs around the world that already knew the names of toys. And these dogs were exceptional in their ability to learn names of toys. They were learning really fast. And I was a bit stuck because, I had these bunch of other experiments that I was supposed to do during my PhD. And 6 dogs was not going to cut it. I could not do all of these studies with only 6 dogs. And that was about the time that COVID hit. And because these dogs were anyway far away from us, then I was testing them online. And I had a lot of fun testing them online. And whenever I saw them get a toy, I was really excited to see, will they get it? Will they not get it? And that's where the idea of the Genius Dog Challenge came. So on one hand, we wanted to recruit more dogs and kind of spread the word that we are searching for these very talented dogs that know the names of toys. And on the other hand, we also wanted to learn more about the dogs that we already had. And then we did the Genius Dog Challenge, which was basically a series of experiments where the owners got at the beginning of a week a box that either had at the first stage 6 toys and then later they got 12 toys. And they had 1 week to teach their dogs the names of these toys. And then we tested them live. So we ran the experiment live and we watched to see, will the dogs be able to learn the names of the toys?
So then tell me about how did the dogs perform?
They were amazing. I mean, they managed to learn about 12 toys in a single week. And I think anyone listening to us at home that maybe has a dog would know that it's almost impossible to teach your dog 12 new commands only on a verbal cue in a single week. That's an extraordinary rate of learning. And not only that, we actually later tested their memory. So we tested it 1 month, 2 months, and even 2 years later. And we found that even after 2 years, they were still able to remember the names of these toys. And it's a bit like, when you study for an exam. Let's say you only study the night before an exam. You have a lot of information in a very short time frame that you're trying to learn. You would likely forget all of this information 1 or 2 days after the exam. What we saw with these dogs is even though they had a very tight, compressed learning schedule, they were still able to remember the names of the toys after a very long time.
Yeah, so, I'll say, with my sister's dog, with my friend's dog, if you use the word, they know it's time to go out and they react. You'll say, we're going to go for a W because they don't react to the W. But if you say walk, they know exactly what's going on and they're at the door before you can, move. So are you training them in the same type of way to learn, just how to communicate? Or
to be honest, I don't really know how we're training them. So we're not intentionally training them to do anything.
Okay.
The way these dogs came to us is that the owners were playing with them. The owners gave them some toys, and then one day they noticed the dogs know the names of the toys. And in the vast majority of the owners did not do this intentionally. And when we tried to train the dogs to learn the names of toys intentionally, we took naive dogs that didn't know the names, they were not successful. So it seems like there's something about these dogs that they're able to naturally pick up the names of toys just by playing with their owners. And I think it is different than what you're describing because what you're describing is basically a dog forming a simple association. So the dog hears the word walk and then learns that after hearing this word, they're going to go for a walk. And they connect these two stimuli together. I hear the word, it means I'm going to go for a walk. But in this case, it's something different happening, because we're asking the dog, can you get me, let's say, elephant? And when he goes into the room, he needs to know that getting teddy bear will not lead to the same result as getting elephant. So it's something much more complicated.
So what are you hoping to learn from this?
So there are a lot of different things we can learn from this. First of all, these dogs give us kind of a special window into what goes on in a dog's mind, because we can directly ask them questions. And with their answers, with the toys that they're bringing us, they basically answer these questions. So for example, I can present these dogs with a bunch of different balls and ask the dog, can you bring me a ball? And based on whichever ball the dog chooses, I can understand what is the mental representation for a dog of a ball. So when I say ball, what kind of maybe picture or smell or whatever is happening in the dog's mind, what does that mean for the dog? So that's one aspect, to use these objects to understand what goes on in the dog's mind.
You'd have like 3 different balls, like a football, a basketball, and ask the dog to bring back the different, or you just said ball.
So yeah, that could be one option, right? We can use different balls and see which one the dog would bring.
Yeah.
Or we can see, and that will tell us what the dog thinks, right? Because for us, maybe anything that can be thrown is a ball, but maybe for the dog, only round things are balls. So another aspect would be to try and understand what actually is language. And I know this is a bit of a fuzzy idea, but basically dogs, during domestication, they evolved in the same environment as humans. And today, many family dogs, they grow up in the same environment as toddlers, right, as kids. So they are exposed to many of the same stimuli. So we can work with these dogs to understand, and we can run many of the same tests that we do run with kids to see how do dogs and children differ in the way that they understand words. So that's another thing that we can study. And the third aspect is, why are these dogs different from other dogs, right? Is there something special about the way that they perceive the world? Is there something special about their social cognitive abilities? Why is it that some dogs are able to learn the names of toys and others not?
Yeah. So how did you get involved in studying language in dogs?
So my background is in training animals. And in the group in Budapest where I did my PhD, that's the Family Dog Project, it's been going on for, I think, about 20 years. I started in the early 2000s, end of the 90s. And I think it's the biggest group in the world for studying dogs. And I wanted, as someone that came from dog training, I wanted to improve my knowledge of dogs. And that's when I came into contact with Adam Mikloji. That's the professor who at the time was the head of the Department of Ethology, so the head of the Family Dog Project, and also worked together with Claudia Fugaza, which was at the time the head of this research group as well.
Why would a good dog be gifted? Was it random, or was it more like there was a breed, there was something that made them special? All dogs are special.
Yeah, so first of all, yes, all dogs are special in the sense that all dogs are extraordinary in their ability to read human communication. And that's really something that you notice only when you start working with other animals, how exceptionally good dogs are in communicating with humans and how keen they are to learn from us. And we shouldn't take that for granted. And in fact, that's one of the problems when you're trying to teach dogs the names of toys, because they are so good in reading human communication that, for example, when I was trying to train the dog that I had at the time, my own personal dog, at some point I thought he knew the names of the toys, but it turned out he was reacting to really, really small movements that I was doing involuntarily with my eyes to pick up whichever toy I thought I wanted him to pick.
Wow, so he was paying attention to your eyes.
Exactly. So all dogs are really good in reading human communicative cues, even the ones that we're not intending to give. We don't really know why some dogs are also able to learn the names of toys. What we do know is that while the majority of these dogs are border collies, there are also a lot of other breeds that can do this. And we see also some dog breeds that we were not expecting. So for example, we have Yorkshire Terriers, we have a Pekingese, a Shih Tzu, Pomeranians. There was recently a study from a different group with a pug. So really a wide range of dog breeds. So it doesn't seem to be a breed-specific thing. We also know that these dogs, they like to play. They like to play with toys. But I would say some of them are still a bit lazy and not necessarily that motivated to bring toys. And we do know that they learn, as I said, naturally. So they just play with their owners and they pick up the names of the toys by themselves. They don't need to go through any intensive specific training. This seems to be something that comes very naturally to them.
It seems like the dogs learn this not by being trained, but by being in the family environment.
Yeah, so it might be that there is something about just the natural interaction with the owners, and that these dogs, maybe, we don't know, maybe they are exceptionally good in picking up on social cues for their owners, but they do seem to understand this concept, this kind of abstract idea that objects can have names. And that's what I suspect is the reason why they can so easily learn. Because some of them, we have studies showing that they can learn a name of a new toy after hearing it only 4 times. They don't remember it for very long, but 4 times is enough for them to learn the name of a new toy. And this, to me, suggests that they have kind of this understanding that objects can have names, and then you show them an object, and when you say the name, they understand that this name refers to the object that they've just seen.
Yeah. Well, you can see that with dogs when you say sit, and then they'll sit. You know, if the dog is trained well, like some dogs will be like, you say sit, and then they sit.
Yeah, but that's, I would say, so to get to the point that you say sit and a dog sits.
Yeah.
That's actually really difficult.
Yes.
Yes, a lot of dogs, they will sit when you say sit, but they're not really reacting to the fact that you said sit. In most cases, they will be reacting to the fact that you have a piece of food in your hand, and they know that if they sit while you hold a piece of food, you will give them the piece of food. If you want to test if your dog really knows only the word sit, try standing with your back to your dog and saying sit. Try sitting on the floor in front of your dog and say sit. Try, I don't know, do anything else, and you'll notice that your dog is actually not really picking up on the word that you're saying. They're more picking up on whatever small bodily cues you're giving or whatever environmental cues you have. For example, you're holding the leash, you say sit, your dog knows, oh, I want to go for a walk, I need to sit before he puts on the leash on me. So focusing on the word actually seems to be something that's really difficult for dogs.
Yeah, you know, this is, now that you say that, this is fascinating. My sister's dog, you would say paw, paw, and eventually Mickey would give you his paw. He knew that you wanted something from him.
Yeah. It's likely that when he understands you want something from him, so he will be doing different things. So he might be sitting down, he might be lying down, he might be nudging you with the nose, and then he'll be like, okay, I'll try all of these things I know. Maybe this is the one he wants, give you his paw. But to teach a dog to react only to a verbal cue, that's something that takes normally a lot of repetitions. And this really contrasts with what we see with these dogs that know the names of toys. Because for them, as I said, they need somewhere between 4 repetitions to not more than 5 minutes to learn to bring an object only by hearing its name, versus other dogs will need hundreds of trials to learn to perform something only on the verbal cue.
What do you hope to get out of this research?
I have 2 hopes for this, and they're kind of a different levels. So as someone that really loves dogs, I want to have a better understanding of what goes on in a dog's mind. And I'm hoping that these dogs can help us bridge this difference between humans and dogs and give us a bit of a glimpse into how they perceive the world and how they perceive our communication. But also as a scientist, I'm really interested in what makes us human. And I'm hoping that by working with these dogs, we can understand what are the differences between how we perceive language and how they perceive these names of the objects, to help us understand why humans have language and other animals don't.
Are dogs born gifted, or they just become gifted because they're working with their owner and they're in this environment?
I think it has to be a combination of both. So there has to be some kind of innate ability in these dogs, something that, propels them to want to play with toys, to want to learn, some kind of ability. But of course, this ability will not surface if the owners did not provide the dogs with the environment that will allow them to flourish. And we have some of these dogs, they know the names of 300 toys, right?
Wow.
You can't learn the names of 300 toys if your owner is not giving you 300 toys to play with.
Yeah. But how does an owner know that my dog is gifted? Because every owner thinks their dog is gifted. So
Well,
is there a difference between me thinking my dog is gifted than my dog really being gifted?
it's a very simple test, and I would encourage anyone listening to us, try it out. If it works, shoot me an email. I'd love to hear from you. Basically, all you need to do, if you think your dog knows the names of their toys, put the toys in a different room, step outside of the room, and tell your dog to get one of the toys. And if your dog gets the toy when you cannot see the toy, that's suggesting that the dog is only using the word that you said. So that means your dog can actually rely only on the words to learn the names of the toys. And then I would really love to hear from you because you likely have a gifted dog.
What percentage of dogs are gifted?
I have no idea, because it's really the dogs that we get. I think it's heavily biased from the coverage that we get in the media. We try to, because the way that we reach dog owners is basically by, talking with the media, talking on podcasts, and telling people that we're searching for these kind of dogs. And I would say we get a lot of emails, but the dogs that actually know the names of toys at the end are quite small.
Yeah.
So it's a very small percentage.
Are gifted dogs useful for people who have like high anxiety? Do they help them?
There is this funny reel, I think it's running on Instagram, where a dog says, I have two roles in life. One of them is to calm my human when he's stressed, and the other is to stress my human when he's calm. This is the perfect description of these dogs. Most of them are very high maintenance. And I would say in generally, people always want really smart dogs, but they don't appreciate that the faster your dog is able to learn, the more stimuli you have to give your dog. These dogs get bored really easily, and they have, they have a lot of physical energy, so they need to be very active, and they also have a lot of mental energy, and they really need to be stimulated all the time. I would not say that life with these dogs is very interesting. I don't think it's very calm. Also, I would say that many of them are border collies, and border collies are very sensitive to noises. So they get very anxious, for example, from thunderstorms or fireworks. When we were recording the Genius Dog Challenge, I was always really worried that we're going to have a thunderstorm on a night when we're supposed to be recording, because then I knew the dogs will not be able to do anything. They'll be so scared.
And this is just fascinating of thinking about how these dogs are learning. Are you teaching the dogs more words than just toys?
They would probably, so there seems to be some connection between how much they like an object and how much they're willing to learn its name. But the dogs that are very motivated, they would learn whatever, because sometimes when we need a lot of new objects and to work with these dogs, we do give them objects that are kind of cheap household stuff, and they would learn them. So it doesn't, they are happier to learn a name of a big, fluffy, squeaky, nice toy, but they would learn anything that you ask them, basically, any other object.
I know we're just talking about dogs, and I know that's your focus, but are there other animals being studied for their language comprehension?
And that's an interesting question. So the study of language abilities in animals, I would say it had two phases, kind of. Somewhere around the 60s, 70s, there was this huge hype of testing apes' ability to learn language. And then there were a lot of apes that were intentionally trained for sign language or other types of stimuli. So not a lot, but there were a few cases. And there were also some dolphins that were trained for these things. And then we saw kind of a decrease in the popularity of these type of studies because they're very problematic also ethically. Around the 80s, 90s, early 2000s, what we saw was a lot of studies from Irene Pepperberg with the very famous parrot Alex. She took a bit of a different approach. So the early studies were kind of trying to train apes to learn language because they wanted to prove, look, apes can learn language. What Irene Pepperberg introduced, and I think this is kind of the wave what we see today, is she was teaching Alex, her parrot, words, but her purpose was not to see if he can learn words. Her purpose was to use these words to understand what goes on in his mind. And I think that's what we see today. We see a shift when we're trying to understand what kind of abilities the animals have. So that's kind of one direction this is taking. There are also some other studies with corvids or with monkeys that are trying to understand, can animals understand certain regularities? So do they understand, for example, simple grammatic rules and things like that?
I never thought about it that way, but it's actually really interesting that it is unethical to force an ape to learn sign language.
And so one of the amazing things of working with dogs is that, the studies that we're doing, it's completely natural for the dog. We're working with the dog in its home environment, especially in my studies, where literally, the owner turns on their phone on Zoom, and that's when we do the study in the owner's living room. When we try to test a chimpanzee, this is not the chimpanzee's natural environment in a lab. And that raises a lot of ethical concerns, but it also raises the question, when the chimpanzee is showing me some kind of behavior, which I trained, then what is this actually telling me about the ape's cognitive abilities, right? Because this is something I trained. It's not something that comes naturally. Versus when I work with dogs, this is something that came naturally to them. The owners did not intentionally train them to learn the names of the toys. They just picked it up by themselves.
Yeah. What do you see the future hold for language comprehension in dogs? Like, where are we going with all of this?
So I really hope we're going to be able to understand how they're doing what they're doing. What are the key components that they're paying attention to when they're learning? I think that would be really important. And what's similar and different between them and other dogs? Because I think that would really help us to get a better understanding of how dogs think and hopefully be able to communicate better with our dogs.
Do you feel we're getting better at communicating with our dogs?
I think definitely today, as opposed to 20 or 30 years ago, we do see a huge shift in how humans communicate with their dogs. And I think it's going to the better. Definitely, we're giving dogs more credit as dogs, on one hand. But on the other, there's also this kind of slightly dangerous direction of people that are treating their dogs like kids, and that's problematic because then you're not giving the dog what the dog actually needs. So I think we see here kind of, a bit of a backlash from maybe 30 years ago. The more acceptable way of handling a dog would be to just tie the dog, outside your house in the yard, and that would be it. And that would not bring any justice to the dog as a social being. But on the other hand, having your dog being dressed up in cute clothes and carrying your dog in a purse doesn't necessarily also give your dog the option to behave like a dog. So I hope we will be able in the next few years, decades, to find kind of the middle ground of letting dogs be dogs.
That's actually a really good point, because you do. I live in New York City, and you do see a lot of people dressing their dogs up, walking their dogs in like strollers, and that's, again, not allowing your dog to be a dog.
Yeah, I mean, so as someone that has had an old dog until recently, I do now have a better appreciation to the whole stroller thing, right? Because if your dog cannot walk, then having a stroller is a great option. And yes, if your dog is cold, then you should definitely dress your dog so they're not cold. But there is not such a fine line, between dressing your dog because they're cold and between putting stuff on your dog just to make him look cuter or things like that. So really, I think we need to make sure that everything we're doing for our dog is really from the perspective of, is this something that they feel comfortable with, and does this really improve their well-being?
Yeah, people put booties on their dogs to go walk outside in the streets, and I'm always like, I don't know if that's good or not.
You see, that's like, for example, my dog, again, when he was old, I had to put boots on him because if you live in an area where it's snowing, then they need to have boots sometimes. Or if they're old and they're dragging their feet, they need to have boots. But it's not that I would only do that if the dog actually needs this for a physical reason, and not because they're Crocs for dogs. Does a dog really need Crocs?
I don't know. I don't think so.
Yeah.
As we wrap up, is there anything that I should have asked you that I didn't ask you? Anything you want to say? Tell me before we end.
Yeah, maybe expanding on the previous point of treating our dogs as dogs. In our latest study, the title was "Some Dogs Can Learn from Overhearing Like 1.5-year-old Children." And I think it's really important to emphasize here, what does the word "like" mean? What we demonstrate in many of our studies is that these dogs present behaviors that at the surface level look very similar to what young children are doing. That doesn't mean that what goes on in the dog's mind is the same thing that happens in a child's head. Okay, so when we see similar behaviors between dogs and humans, that does not mean that the cognitive processes that underlie this are the same. It's like, if you look at a bicycle and at a car, they both are moving forward, but the thing that's propelling them is very different. And I think it's very important to remember this, that when we're working with dogs and we're looking at our dog behavior, the fact that our dog is showing us a specific behavior that might look human doesn't mean that he's doing this because the thoughts are the same as the thoughts that we have.
Yeah. Shany Dror, thank you so much for joining me today. Thank you out there for listening. As always, let me know what you think. Put your thoughts in the comments. And until next time, everyone, be safe.